So Carri Richardson, one of America's superstar sprinters, has been banned from her sport and potentially the Olympics for testing positive for marijuana? Why? Because it's supposedly a performance-enhancing drug? Well, anyone who says marijuana is a performance-enhancing drug has not listened to any reggae or any Willie Nelson. So what's the deal with our obsession with marijuana here in America? Let's talk about it in today's video.
I never understood that line. The point was to inhale.
Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concern, maybe you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, and maybe even click that little bell that will notify you when I post a new video. So you just saw a clip of President Obama talking about his experiences with marijuana, and he, like most baby boomers and people who are younger than the baby boomers, who include me as a millennial, believe that marijuana is no worse than alcohol. And in fact, according to the research, it appears that marijuana is not even as bad as alcohol. Like, here are some of the stats that we have. For example, while 88,000 people a year die from overdoses of alcohol, virtually nobody dies of overdose of marijuana. Marijuana is also associated with lower crime rates and lower impaired driving rates. And we actually don't know about the impact of marijuana on pregnancy because of the fact that it's been included in the Schedule 1 of banned substances, along with the likes of LSD, heroin, and ecstasy. And it is actually less regulated than certain other substances such as oxycodone, fentanyl, morphine, opium, and codeine. Pretty much all of which it's less dangerous than. And in fact, America spends $14 billion a year, that's billion with a B, enforcing its anti-marijuana laws, imprisoning many people who wouldn't be in prison otherwise, except for the fact that they had possession of this illicit substance. And for those who say that marijuana is a gateway drug, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, quote, the majority of people who use marijuana do not go on to use other, quote, harder substances. As a result, it's hard to justify banning this substance in the United States today. And in fact, despite the fact that there's limited research available on it, the anecdotal evidence, as a result of its being made available on a medicinal basis in many states, indicates that it can provide some real relief to people who suffer otherwise and are not otherwise well treated by other substances. So why are we so obsessed with this one drug? I mean, conservative Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas even said that we should probably reform our marijuana laws. Well, it turns out that the actual ban on marijuana as it exists now only dates back to 1970, when Richard Nixon declared his war on drugs, a war which frankly has been a complete disaster for the United States. From what I can tell, the only winners in this war have been the private contractors who provide prisons here in the United States. And contrast our experience with what's going on in Portugal, where they've essentially made all drugs legal, but treat it as a health problem. And their crime and drug use have gone down. And ironically, in 1972, just 2 years after the Controlled Substances Act passed, Richard Nixon had appointed a commission, the Schaefer Commission, which recommended that marijuana be taken off the Schedule 1 substances list. How did Richard Nixon react to that? Well, he reacted negatively. He didn't want to do that. Why? Because he was obsessed with the counterculture, and he associated marijuana with the counterculture in the 1960s and early 1970s, and as a result of that, wanted to have it on that controlled substances list. So why do we still have this obsession with marijuana here in the United States? It's simply because of the fact that we had Richard Nixon, a paranoid individual, looking for ways to attack the counterculture, and this was one way that he thought he could do it. Now, I'm not going to go out there and advocate for the use of marijuana, but what I am going to say is that the resources that we're spending on enforcing our marijuana laws could certainly be better spent elsewhere, like in education or healthcare, for example. Both policies that might actually help us reduce the scourge of inequality and drugs in our society. What's more is it would be great to get some research to find out what are the actual benefits of marijuana as opposed to other drugs that can be used to treat different disorders. Again, the evidence we have is purely anecdotal. If real scientific research could be done into its benefits and its side effects, then we could get some real valuable information here. Finally, taking it off the controlled substances list would open it up to, number one, taxation, which could generate revenues for states and the federal government, and number two, to regulation, where we'd get some kind of uniformity in what gets distributed to patients. Finally, from a Democratic activist perspective, I think it's worth pointing out that there's a substantial group of the white middle class, the same people who have turned over their support to Trump and the Republicans, who support legalization of marijuana. And so this is an opportunity then for the Democrats to essentially peel off a certain segment of this population that otherwise might have been moving over toward the Republicans based upon their racial arguments. So from the perspective of a Democratic activist and an American, I think it's well past the time that we need to be looking at getting rid of our banning of marijuana, and instead free up some of these resources for the treatment of people who might suffer from its effects and the effects of some of the other drugs that really have caused a scourge on society. So if you agree with me or disagree with me, I'd love to hear your comments below. As always, I'll post links to the articles I mention here. And if you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, it'd be a huge help. I'll see you in the next video, and in the meantime, let's hope for continued progress.